All right, welcome to the show. This is the 2022 Dickson County Election Podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Spurlock, and I have a radio show that I do every Saturday morning on WDKN, and I also write a newspaper article every week in the Dickson Post that is all about Dickson County history. And the reason that I've decided to do this podcast was I wanted to give the listeners of Dickson County, the people who listen to the radio show, the people who read the newspaper column, just an opportunity to learn more about the local candidates that are running for office here in Dickson County this year during this election cycle. So we've got several races happening this summer, several campaigns, and my goal is just to give them an opportunity to talk to you so that you can learn a little bit more about them. Today, we have Mr. Craig Monsue, who is running for General Sessions Judge here in Dickson County. He's agreed to come on the show today. And Mr. Monsue, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Justin, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to sit down and speak with your viewers.
Well, I really appreciate it. We usually start this show off by just giving the guest a chance to tell a little bit about themselves so that the listeners will know kind of who they are. And I found that the best way to do that is usually start at the beginning. So could you just tell us a little bit about your early life, and we'll just kind of go from there. All
right. Well, you've heard people say, well, I was born and raised here. I can't say that. I was actually born in Nashville, and I think 3 days later is when I came home to Dickson. That was 1974, a while back. Doesn't seem like that long ago. Grew up on West 3rd Street in West Dickson. Great neighborhood. A lot of great friends, or a lot of great memories from that time. Went to Dickson County schools for my all my 12 years of school there, and graduated Dickson County High School in 1992. Played on the football team and the soccer team, and I was on the wrestling team.
And we were pretty good at football back then. We had just come off an 88 state championship team, and then from what the old-timers tell me, that I interview at the radio station, 89 was probably a better team than 88, and then they said for a few years after that they were pretty good too. So you got to be part of the Cougars back in the heyday, I guess you could say.
1988 was my freshman year, so I joined the team. Of course, back then it was Dickson County, high school was 10, 11, and 12. Mm-hmm. So I was a member of the 1989 team, and it was an amazing team. If you remember Jeffrey Vaughn, Chris Huddleston, and oh gosh, now I can't even think of his name. But anyway, a lot of good guys on the team.
I'll put you on the spot here.
You put me on the spot. Mike Gilmer, he was on the team, and a lot of great guys, a lot of great players.
Well, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk a little bit about Cougars football from the heyday, because we're struggling these days, but we've been talking about the old days a lot, and we're really trying to get back there with our new coach. So
yeah, well, hopefully they'll be able to turn it around. Back then it really was Cougar pride. And, it wasn't just being proud to be on the football team. I mean, the entire county was proud of what those teams accomplished. And, of course, head coach was Jerry Pearson, and Coach Bobby Burgess, and Coach Ed Caudill, and Coach Bobian, and Coach Shealy, and Coach Fuzzle. I mean, all those. And I may have left somebody out. I think I got most of them. But
they were great, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And just being able to learn from mentors and teachers and coaches like that. I mean, it's priceless. We
had a lot of them here too growing up. I got the chance to talk to Coach Fuzzle about 2 weeks ago on the radio. He did a radio show with me, and he was just fantastic growing up. I always admired him. He always inspired me, and still to this day, he's still got that, that attitude about him, and it's just fun. Looking back and getting to talk to those guys, because we've been blessed here in Dickson County to have a lot of really good educators and coaches that I think probably more per capita here than just about anywhere. We've had some great ones.
Oh yeah, I mean that's not even mentioned. I mean at that time the Coach Daniel, Coach Overton, that it, and even in the junior high, Coach Jackie Bledsoe. I mean,
yes,
he was a
70. I think 75 wins in a row. Mm-hmm. Didn't lose for 10 years.
And Coach Johnny Chandler and Coach Shelby Rye. I mean, we think about all the great Coach Ray Reagan, coaching the baseball team. I mean, we think about all and the coaches, the Hamiltons.
Oh, yeah.
We've had so many great coaches over the years. Coach Tuck, all of them. So you're right. We've been beyond blessed, and it makes me proud as a parent to know that my kids are going to come up in that same educational system that I grew up in. That's got that the tradition of hiring those people that are just so good at what they do, and the lessons that they'll pass on, to my children. So yeah, I look forward to it. Of course, right now they're only 5, so they got a little ways to go.
But we do have some good teachers coming up that are a little bit younger who were inspired by that old crew. They've all retired, but they inspired me and some of the guys my age and ladies my age that are working up there. So I think you got another good crop of teachers coming through that were inspired by that first group. So that's good that we keep that tradition and stuff around here. So, so it sounds like you had a pretty good time growing up here in Dickson County, and
I did a lot of friendships made, and just from of course being on the football team back then. That was what basically consumed you. So it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of times if you weren't practicing football or playing football, you were thinking about football, you were studying football. But that's what you do when to be successful, and that's what our coaches taught us. It wasn't that practice makes perfect. It's that perfect practice makes perfect.
And I think we're kind of getting back to that. Our new coach, who we just hired, but I got a chance, school, we're doing this podcast here at the beginning of June, if anybody's listening a little bit later on, and it was just a few weeks ago that we were in school. But as we were winding down the school year, the teachers get together, and have time to talk a little bit right before the end of the year. And I really got to talk to the new coach, Tomlinson. Coach T is what we call him. And he's really an old school kind of guy. And for the first time in a long time, I really feel like we're going to kind of get back to that old Cougar Pride mentality that we had back, even 20 years ago when I was in school. We still had that. We've gotten away from it here recently, but he's an old school kind of guy, and I think he's going to bring it back. And I'm super excited about where we're headed. So hopefully things are about to change. But so you grew up here, went to high school here. Tell me what happens after you graduate from high school. You got big decisions to make. I know a lot of these guys that just graduated, they're not sure what they're going to do yet, but they've got some plans, and I'm sure you were kind of like that at their age.
Oh yeah, 1992. When I graduated, I was going to go in the Army. Of course, you got to think about what had just ended the year before, Operation Desert Storm. But I was all set. I'd taken the ASVAB. I'd met with the recruiter. I was ready to go and take my oath and enlist. And my parents didn't care for that idea, which my dad, he served in the Army during the Korean War. And he didn't want to see me do that, and my mom certainly didn't. And they asked me to consider school instead. So they agreed that if I would delay going into the Army, that they would pay for me to go to school, as far as paying for my schooling at MTSU. So that's what I did. I didn't go in the Army, and I enrolled at MTSU. Went there, and I knew from the outset I was going to major in criminal justice administration. I didn't have any hard decisions to make as far as picking a major when I first arrived on campus and started registering for classes. And you see one of the classes in criminal justice administration, one of the courses is called serial killers. Who wouldn't want to take a class like that?
Is that what drew you in?
That that was part of it. But
it's interesting, though.
Yeah, it was good stuff. When I'm thinking about that, and of course, back then it wasn't like it is now, where there's true crime shows on. There's this obsession with it, and everybody watches true crime. But back then, there was some of those shows. But and then, of course, you remember back then the movie The Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, yeah.
That made, you want to be an FBI agent, to go to the behavioral science unit at Quantico, Virginia, and go hunt serial killers. So, but anyway, so I was going to chose criminal justice administration. And then my spring semester of my freshman year, I joined a fraternity, made a lot of good friends there. And I guess you could say that I just kind of put in the rear view the idea of going in the Army, and that I decided to stick with school. Then my junior year, I met my wife-to-be, Angie, and I'll just go ahead and say we've been married since 1998, so we just had our 24th wedding anniversary in May, and we were college sweethearts. I was a junior, she was a freshman. She went to Franklin High School, and we met in Murfreesboro. So got out of MTSU in 1997. I stayed an extra year and picked up a second degree. So I have a bachelor's of science degree in criminal justice administration and psychology. So that was my educational background as far as that went. Got out of school. Of course, began looking for a job, and I was working a couple of jobs while I was trying to find a job in my major, and I was working for a temp agency, just doing clerical work, data entry, things like that in Nashville. And I was fortunate enough in October of 97 to be hired by the Tennessee Department of Correction, and I was a probation officer, and I was assigned to the Division III Criminal Court in Davidson County under Judge Cheryl Blackburn. She's been a criminal court judge there for a lot of years, so it kind of brings it back around to talking about your learning from legends. She's kind of a legend in Davidson County, law circles as far as her. She was a former prosecutor and prosecuted all these high-profile trials and then became a criminal court judge, and it was great to be able to learn from her. So I did that job for a year or so, and then I kind of got interested, kind of get bit by the bug, you could say, being in court and seeing lawyers. So I'd never really planned on going to law school, but being in court and seeing that kind of sparked an interest, I guess you'd say. So I looked into law school, and Nashville School of Law had a great program where you could attend. Now, traditional law schools, you'd attend those for 3 years. Nashville School of Law, you could attend for 4 years, so it was considered a part-time program, but you'd go to school in the evenings and you could work full-time during the day and keep a full-time job. Most traditional 3-year law schools, you can't do that. So at that point, when I entered law school in 1999, I'd taken a 2-year break from the time I got out of MTSU and when I actually entered law school, but my wife and I had gotten married in the meantime. Of course, having a wife to support and bills to pay, it wasn't an option for me to attend a traditional 3-year law school and be able to quit and pack up and move away, because at that time there wasn't Belmont School of Law, and I think Lincoln Memorial down in West Tennessee didn't exist at the time. You had 4 choices for law school in Tennessee. You had Memphis, Vanderbilt, Nashville School of Law, or the University of Tennessee. So in any event, I applied to Nashville School of Law, got accepted, and started classes in 1999, and took courses under some just fantastic lawyers and judges. Judge Blackburn was actually my criminal law professor. Former Chief Justice, now deceased, Justice A.A. Birch of the Tennessee Supreme Court was an instructor. Judge Ben Cantrell of the Tennessee Court of Appeals was an instructor. Judge Steve Dozier, who's a criminal court judge in Nashville, was an instructor. So Chancellor Corlew from Murfreesboro. So, I mean, we just had just wonderful instructors at Nashville School of Law. So graduated law school in 2003 and took the bar exam in July of that year, passed the bar exam, and was fortunate enough to be sworn in later that year. Now, at the time, I was still working for the Department of Correction. I stuck with that job for a while, and I was kind of testing the waters and putting feelers out and seeing about, applying for jobs out in, practicing law. Didn't do anything until 2004. When I joined an attorney with an office in Fairview, and we practiced a lot of mostly bankruptcy, some personal injury, divorce and family law, and criminal defense. So took cases in Hickman County, Williamson County, Dickson County, mostly those 3 counties, and being there in Fairview, kind of centrally located to all of those towns, and practiced a lot in the general sessions courts and in the circuit courts and the chancery courts. Stayed with that job for a little bit short of a year. It was actually no, it wasn't even a year. It was about 8 months. Now that I think about it, it was I think it was November 2004 until August 2005. August 2005, I had interviewed with District Attorney General Dan Alsobrooks, who was our longtime District Attorney General here in the 23rd Judicial District, our 5-county district, and he appointed me as an Assistant District Attorney for prosecuting domestic violence cases. So that's where I got my start here, getting to come back home to Dickson County, and so blessed to be able to come back home and work. So started with the District Attorney's Office in 2005, handling domestic violence cases. Of course, my wife and I, we lived in Nashville a couple of years after I got out of school, and was working. We were both working in Nashville. We bought a house in Murfreesboro and stayed there a few years. But when I got hired by the DA's office here, I ended up coming back home and staying with my parents for a few months until we could buy us a house. So, bought a house here in Dickson, and started out doing the domestic violence cases with the DA's office. Like I said, I was there in that position for about a year, and then I was transferred to the DUI prosecutor position, where I prosecuted DUIs, vehicular assaults, vehicular homicides. Now, in the domestic violence and the DUI position, I would prosecute cases in all the counties in the district, General Sessions Court and Circuit Court. Then, after about a year of doing the domestic, about a year of doing the DUI prosecutor job, I was placed in Houston and Stewart counties, handling just General Sessions courts. So that's what I mostly did, and Humphreys County. I helped out down there as well. So practicing, prosecuting cases in General Sessions in Houston County, Stewart County, and Humphreys County. Did that for a while, and then I was made the prosecutor or assigned as prosecutor for Houston County. So I did all the courts in Houston County, juvenile court, circuit court, General Sessions Court. And then after a couple years, I think, in Houston County, then I was transferred to Humphreys County. So doing the same job, same courts, juvenile court, circuit court, General Sessions Court, except now it was in a bigger county or a more populous county. So 2005 to 2014 was the time I spent with the District Attorney General's office. In 2012, I started thinking about what my next step in my career would be. Now, the former Dickson County General Sessions Judge, Judge Durwood Moore. I know you've heard of Judge Moore.
Oh, yeah.
He was on the bench for right at 40 years.
Yeah.
And he decided he was going to retire. So I put my name in the hat to run for General Sessions Judge at that time. And it was myself and four other attorneys that ran for that job back then. And fortunate enough, come August when the election happened, I was fortunate enough, blessed enough to have won that. So first elected in 2014, and I've proudly served as the Dickson County General Sessions Judge since 2014, and now seeking re-election for a second term.
Was that a tough decision to make when you were working for the DA's office to run for judge? I guess at some point, like you said, you have to decide what you're going to do next, and in that particular line of work, I guess you don't do the same thing forever. You've got to look at doing something else. Was it a hard decision to run for judge? Because I mean, being a judge is a tough job, in my opinion. It's it's tough to have to make all those decisions. You could have gone, I guess, into the private practice, or you could have gone some other direction, but you chose a judge, and I'm just kind of curious as to why.
Well, I've always, in my entire professional career, with the exception of the 5 months between when I got out of college and when I went to work for the Department of Correction, I've worked in public service. So, working for the state of Tennessee Department of Correction and the Board of Probation and Parole, and then working for the District Attorney General's office, it just seemed natural that I would continue in that role. And I guess the question I asked myself was, what could I do to better serve, my fellow citizens of Dickson County, than to be it's not called the county judge, but in essence, that's what it is, to be the judge for the county. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a hard decision from that standpoint. Now, it is not easy running for office by any means. So there was a lot of thinking, a lot of praying, a lot of soul searching that went into that, a lot of discussion with my wife. But we were still fairly young, and we didn't have children at the time. So, Judge Moore, like I said, had been there for a long time, and I just I said, well, it's now seems like a good time to do that if I'm planning on doing that, because if not, I'll have to wait another 8 years, because the judgeships are for 8-year terms, same as all the judgeships, public defender and district attorney general. They're all 8-year terms. So I said, if I want to do this, now is the time to do it. And so then it was off to the races, so to speak.
So I guess this is your first re-election, because since it's an 8-year term, I guess 6, 7, 8. So this is the first time that you've run for re-election. So this is usually where I ask, why did you decide to run? And it is raining pretty hard outside. If anybody, we probably need that rain, but it's coming down pretty hard. If anybody hears it, but this is normally the part of the show where I ask, why did you choose to run, and what kind of makes you qualified. But you've been in this position for a while, so I guess the way I would like to ask this question is, what characteristics about your personality do you think have made you an effective judge over the past few years?
Patience is probably number one. Of course, everybody loves to watch on TV, and I mean, our system, whether it's civil or criminal, it's all adversarial in nature. By that I mean you're pitting one side against another. I mean, it's really no different than when you think about it, a football game. Sure. You've got two sides competing against each other, and you've got a group of officials, in my case just one official, so to speak, calling penalties, objection, sustained or overruled. You're making those decisions. But yes, patience is probably the number one thing I would say that I've kind of developed more as I've matured. You'll have. I want everyone to be able to come into court and now they can't leave. I mean, there's no way, like I said, with it being an adversarial system, for both people to leave and say, hey, I got my way. That just doesn't happen. But if both sides can leave and say, you know what, I may not have won my case, but I was listened to, I think that goes a long way with people. So listening, being a good listener, number one, and then and also going along with that is patience, because you will have at times. I mean, a lot of people when they come to court, they're not having their best day. I mean, they don't want to be there, number one, and then they're there. They can be there for some fairly unpleasant matters. And, civil cases, people can get really upset when it comes to money. So I just try to remind everyone, I say, hey, this is a civil docket, so let's keep it that way, all right? And just trying to be the voice of reason sometimes. And sometimes it feels like you're more of a mediator than a judge, or you're as much of a mediator as you are a judge. You're like, okay, y'all settle down, all right? Now, I've heard from you, let me hear from you, so you're, a lot of times you feel like a mediator or a referee, and a lot of times you feel like an umpire calling balls and strikes. So
I appreciate the sports references, because as a coach and somebody who played sports just like yourself, I appreciate those analogies, because it's easy for me to understand, and I'm sure our listeners can understand that a little better from you using those analogies as well. So,
well, growing up playing sports my whole life, Little League and everything else, that's kind of, you speak about what you know, and I knew sports too.
That's kind of our thing here in Dickson County. I've always argued for a long time we're very sports oriented. So Judge Moore is there for 40 years. That's got to be tough to come in after somebody who's been there and established themselves over such a long period of time. But I'm sure there were things that you want to do differently from Judge Moore, and so I usually ask at this point in the conversation, what would you do differently or better than previous? But kind of looking back over your last 8 years, is there anything that you did that was different from the way that Moore did it, or how are you different from him?
Well, when I first ran or first announced that I was going to run, I told everybody that I wanted to, when I say everybody, I put it on a Facebook page. I put my platform out there, which I can speak about that a little bit if you want to. But one of and my platform just more general, but speaking more specifically, the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to implement traffic school. And what that was, back then, if someone came in, for instance, on a moving violation, speeding ticket, they had two options: plead guilty or plead not guilty. If you plead guilty, of course, you get found guilty. You have to pay a $50 fine and court cost, and you get points on your driver's license. Your insurance company finds out about it. They might hike your premium rates up, and it's just an all-around bad situation. If you plead not guilty, then they'd reset your case. and you'd have to come back for a hearing with the state trooper usually, or the sheriff's deputy that wrote the citation, and in front of the judge, and then the judge would decide what to do with it. Well, I said, how about a third way? Well, if we do traffic school, and folks, if they got a citation, they could come in, and the Department of Safety keeps a list of all these certified traffic school providers. They attend a 4-hour class, they submit a certificate to the court clerk's office, and they pay the court cost, and the ticket gets dismissed. Now, it ends up costing about the same as what it would be if they pled guilty. And somebody might say, well, what's the advantage then? Well, the advantage is it results in a dismissal. It's no points on their license, and hopefully their insurance company doesn't raise their insurance rates over it. And plus, then the person wouldn't have to take an extra day to take off work to come back for a hearing in front of the judge, when they can come in on a first appearance, ask for traffic school, get that option, and they never have to come back to court on that ticket again.
That's interesting.
So that was the first big thing I wanted to do, and and right after I took office, I went and talked with Miss Barbara Spann, who was the longtime court clerk, and told her that I wanted to make that change, and we had to have several discussions about that, but we were able to make it happen, and I'm proud that we were able to make that change and offer another option out there for folks where it wasn't just either or.
Speaking of options, I try to be as equal and fair as I can on this particular show. So if I have somebody that comes on the show and they have an opponent running against them, I always invite the opponent to come on. And so I've spoke with the person that's running against you, and he brought up an interesting topic, I guess, in that recording that we did about drug furloughs, and he had made several interesting points about that, but I wanted to know if you maybe wouldn't mind speaking a little bit about that, maybe explaining what that is. I'm not probably the person to explain it, but if you don't mind, so if somebody gets in trouble with drugs, and they come to court, there is this furlough program, and if you don't mind, maybe tell me a little more about that.
Okay, well, I wouldn't be so formal as to call it a program, but in any event, so what started me thinking about this was a while back, the General Assembly changed the sentencing laws. They passed a new sentencing act. And what that did was it took away a lot of discretion from judges as far as specifically people that were on probation that violated probation. Okay, so with having that discretion stripped away by that law, it kind of limited what we could do with folks. Now, there's always been two situations where a person can be sentenced. Now, well, let me back up just a second. With the Sentencing Act, for instance, a first technical violation, let's say a failed drug screen, the Act would say, well, you can't. You have to sentence them to. You can sentence them to as much as 15 days, but no more. For a second violation, as much as 30 days, but no more. And then for a third violation, I think as much as 90 days. And so someone would, under that statute, would have to violate probation, 3 or 4 times before they could have to end up serving their sentence. So it's not about getting a second chance, it's about getting a third, fourth, or fifth chance, right? So when that statute changed, now there was 2 situations where the court has discretion to entirely revoke someone's probation. So now these are, when I say probation, so for instance, someone gets pulled over in the city. Officer approaches the car, smells an odor of marijuana. That gives him probable cause to search the vehicle, and he finds a bag of marijuana. He issues a citation for simple possession. Now, this is just a hypothetical situation, but this is something I see. Or it could be something like a window tint violation that initiated the traffic stop or speeding or whatever. And they approach the car, smell marijuana. They've got probable cause to conduct a search. They search the car, find a bag of marijuana. They issue a misdemeanor citation to the person for simple possession of marijuana, which is a Class A misdemeanor. Now, that's all that General Sessions Court deals with is misdemeanors. Now, we do deal with felonies as far as we can have a preliminary hearing where the court would have to find probable cause and then bind the case over to the grand jury. But as far as someone who's pled guilty in court and been sentenced in General Sessions Court, it's only for misdemeanors. So it's for Class A, B, or C misdemeanors. So the sentences on those range from 30 days to 6 months to 11 months, 29 days. So simple possession of marijuana is a Class A misdemeanor, 11 months, 29 day sentence. They come in to court. They may not have an attorney. They'll talk to the assistant DA that's prosecuting in the court that day. The DA says, okay, I'll offer you a deal. You can plead guilty to simple possession, 11 months, 29 day sentence, suspended to probation, no jail time, pay a $250 fine and cost, and you'll be on supervised probation. Okay, I'll take it. So they come up. I go over their rights with them. ask them if they want to waive their rights, if they understand their rights, if they want to waive their rights, enter a guilty plea, and then if that plea is given freely, knowingly, and voluntarily. They say yes to all that. I ask them how they plead. They plead guilty. I sentence them. Court, on your plea of guilty, the court finds you guilty. You're fined $250, taxed with the cost, sentenced to 11 months, 29 days in the county jail, suspended to probation. They'll talk to the probation officer, so they go on probation. Now, there's a whole long list of rules and regulations for someone on probation. For instance, they obey the laws of the United States and the state of Tennessee. They'll make a truthful report to their probation officer and go in and meet with them in the office. They'll take any drug screens as ordered. The probation officer orders them to do community service work, or, for instance, on a shoplifting case, to do a shoplifting class. Then, those are all conditions of probation. So if they violate any one of those conditions, let's say that they miss a meeting with their probation officer, the probation officer can file a warrant that would be signed by me, the judge. The sheriff's office would go out and arrest that person, serve that warrant on them, and they'd be usually held in jail without bond until such time as they have a hearing, usually within 10 days or so. They're brought back into court, and we'll have a hearing on the violation. Now, there's always been two types of violations where it's the legislature gives the courts the discretion to say it's zero tolerance. One is for new charges. The other is for what's known as absconding. So if someone there's different definitions of absconding, but basically, if someone is on probation and their probation officer hasn't heard from them for a period of 60 days or so, and they send them a letter and there's no response, they call them on the phone, they get no response to them, then they can be classified as absconding. They'll then issue the warrant. Like I said, I'll sign the warrant, put a hold for court on it. They'll be arrested at some point, brought back into court on the violation. So on a violation of probation, offenders have two fundamental rights. They have the right to have an attorney. Of course, most of them being in jail on VOPs. Very rare that anyone with a VOP gets a bond. Then they will be appointed a public defender to represent them. Then the second right they have is the right to have a hearing at which the state would have to prove by preponderance of the evidence that they violated one or more conditions of probation. And most of the time they'll take the witness stand in their own defense and they'll admit they violated probation. Yeah, I missed a meeting. Okay, hey. So it's not about culpability. It comes down to punishment. What do you do with those folks? So like I said, with this law being passed, that limits the discretion. Well, if they're absconders or they've gotten new charges, most of the time the probation office wants them to be revoked to serve their sentence, which means that you revoke their probation, you take them off probation, and you put their sentence into effect. That is, you send them to the jail with an order telling the jail that to hold them until they serve their sentence. Now, under our state statutes, a misdemeanor sentence of 11 months, 29 days is calculated at 75% release eligibility, and that's commonly referred to as an out date or a flat date or a red date for release eligibility date. When they reach that 75% release eligibility, that is when they've served 75% of that 11 months, 29 day sentence, then they're considered to be what's known as flat, and they will be released and considered to be sentence served. So you've got someone that has been charged and convicted of something like simple possession or possession of drug paraphernalia. They've been put on probation. It didn't work out for them. They never reported their probation officer, or after getting put on probation, they get new charges, usually for simple possession or possession of drug paraphernalia because they've got a drug problem. They come into court, they have a violation hearing, or they admit that they violated, and they say, hey, Judge, I'll serve my sentence. Usually the public defender's office talks to them, represents them, and they'll talk to them and say, hey, have you ever thought about treatment? Some of them say yes, some of them say no. Have you ever been offered an opportunity to go to treatment? A lot of times the answer is no. And then the next question is, well, would you be interested in getting some treatment? And they say, well, yeah, I might be interested in doing that. Why not? I'll tell people, I'll say, you know what? You've messed up on your probation, so you've got two choices, treatment or jail. What do you want to do? And of course, most people will say, hey, I would like to get a chance at going to treatment. So we can have these folks that are been sentenced to 11 months, 29 days for possessing drugs or drug paraphernalia. We can have them sit in jail for 9 months, and then they get released from jail. And what are they going to do? They're going to go right back to what they were doing before they went to jail, and then they'll end up back in jail again. So instead of keeping them in jail, where it costs the county probably $40 or $50 a day to house them. When I say the county, I'm talking about the taxpayers of what you and I are taxpayers
Sure.
too.
Yeah.
It costs the county $40 or $50 a day or whatever it is to keep them in jail on a misdemeanor sentence. Or I can call my friend who works with the public defender's office and works with all these treatment places and works with the 23rd District Drug Court program, and he can get them a bed in treatment, and I can sign an order releasing them from jail to go to treatment, and it costs the county nothing. So what we'll do is we'll type up those furlough orders, and let's say that someone's going somewhere like the Hope Center. That's a year-long program. So they can go to the Hope Center for a year. If they successfully complete that program and they come out, now the furlough order will tell them, when you complete the program, you let us know, let the court clerk's office know, and we'll put you back on the docket, and they come in on their review date, then, hey, you've been in treatment a year. I can give you credit, day-for-day credit for every day you spent in treatment on your sentence. Well, guess what? You don't have to go back to jail. You're successful. So, here you go. Now, the furlough orders state that if someone is released and they either voluntarily leave their treatment program or they're terminated, for instance, they come back and they fail a drug screen. Because, let me back up just a second and maybe give you a little background on how this works. A lot of these treatments have what they call vocational work programs. So these treatment centers, how do they pay? How does a person pay for treatment to be in a treatment? Because it's not free. Now, it doesn't cost the county anything, but the treatment program itself is not free. Well, they have partnerships or partnered with companies that need workers. I mean, we see it on the news, hear about it every day. There's a worker shortage. Why doesn't anybody want to work anymore? Mm-hmm. So, they will partner with these companies, and they will go into the treatment program, and they'll have a bed there. So that's where they sleep every night, and they'll have a curfew there. But in the mornings, they have to get up and they have to go to work. And they're subject to being called back to the treatment center at any point to be given a drug screen if they think that they're not abiding by their conditions. Because that's a condition of the furlough too, is they cannot use drugs or alcohol while they're on furlough. So they will both go to work, and then the treatment facility will actually cash their check or take their check, and those folks will be paying for their own treatment for the money they make at the job they work. Okay, and a lot of times when they finish treatment and they've paid for all their treatment, well, they've got money left over. So what does that give them? Well, they've got now enough money probably at this point saved up, because these are good paying jobs. They can go and pay for first and last month's rent on an apartment and security deposit, so they've got their own place to stay. And then they probably got enough to pay for a down payment on an automobile, because they're going to need transportation to get to and from work. And then when they finish treatment, they're also given aftercare recommendations, where most of the time they're expected to take part in group therapy, something like Celebrate Recovery or Narcotics Anonymous meetings or Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, something like that. They're recommended that for aftercare. Hey, keep going to your meetings, keep working your program. These are all, 12-step programs by and large. Okay? So that's how someone can go from the jail to be furloughed via a court order to go to treatment. Now, that's best case scenario, that they do everything just wonderful and they don't have to return to the jail. Well, let's say that they, old habits are hard to break, and they use drugs while they're out on furlough, and they come back to their house, the treatment center, and they get a random drug screen. Subjected to a random drug screen. They test positive. The treatment center, a lot of them are zero tolerance too. They'll kick them out. Well, that furlough order will say on it, hey, if you either leave voluntarily or you're kicked out and terminated from treatment, you are to immediately go back to the Dickson County Jail to resume serving your sentence. And you do not get any credit for the days you spend in treatment against your sentence. Wow. So basically, while they're in treatment, their sentence is put on hold. So they get kicked out of treatment. A lot of them go back to the jail. Now, then they'll write me a letter and say, hey, Judge, can I get a chance to go to another treatment center? And I'm thinking, no, well, probably not. You'll just need to wait until you finish your jail sentence at that point, because you've had your opportunity. There's other people that want an opportunity to go. Right. And, you're going to, let them have a chance to go to treatment, and where you're not taking up a bed that they could use. So most of them go back to the jail. Well, what do you do if they don't? Well, it says it right there in the furlough order. If they are terminated from treatment or voluntarily leave and they don't return to the jail, then a warrant will be issued charging them with escape, which is another Class A misdemeanor. So they are kicked out or they leave. The treatment centers, they notify the jail, they notify the clerk's office. Hey, this person left or they got kicked out. We look for them the next day on the jail roster. If they're not on it, guess what? One of the officers at the jail is doing a warrant for charging them with escape. Well, where's that person going to go when they get out of treatment? Most all of them are from Dickson County or maybe Hickman County, but I mean, they're close by.
Sure, yeah.
They're going to come back home because that's where all their friends are. That's where all their family is. That's their support system. A lot of times it's the same system, the same support system that's been enabling them all these years. So they come back home. They get picked up. They get brought into court. They're held in jail. They come into court, and I see them. I say, hey, so you got furloughed? Didn't work out, huh? No, Judge, it didn't. I'm sorry. Well, you don't have to apologize to me, but you just made it worse on yourself because you're serving your original sentence now. That's 1129 at 75%. Well, don't I get credit for the days I spent in treatment? Not if you didn't complete it. You just got to finish your sentence out. Your sentence was put on hold, so you got to finish it out. Oh, and by the way, you're now charged with escape because you left treatment and didn't go back to the jail. What do you want to do on that case? Well, I'll plead guilty. Well, are you pleading guilty freely, knowingly, and voluntarily? Yes, I am. Then how do you plead to escape? Guilty. Court finds you guilty. You're sentenced to 11 months, 29 days in jail at 75% release eligibility. That's mandatorily consecutive to the 1129 sentence that you've still got left to serve. So if these folks are getting furloughed to go to treatment and they leave or get kicked out and they don't return to the jail, they're looking at getting another year added onto their sentence, which is enough in and of itself to make most people say, hey, I'll just go back to the jail. I don't want an extra year to serve.
Yeah. That's
so
tough.
that's I would like to say in a nutshell, but that was probably about a 10 or 12 minute explanation, maybe a little bit
good
longer.
Explanation, though.
But that's the best way I can explain it. And like I said, it's nothing so formal. Now, I have spoken with Judge Lockhart Mash, who is the presiding judge of the 23rd District Drug Court Program. And I have talked to her, and I believe the other judges in the district, the General Sessions judges in the district have as well, about the possibility of bringing the drug court program into the General Sessions Court. Now, that would be a more structured program than what I'm doing. So I guess you could kind of say this was just maybe a trial run. It was an experiment that I was doing to try to, with the changes in the Sentencing Act that took away some of the judges, some of the discretion that we have, that on those cases where they were sentenced to jail and it was in line with the statutory requirements as far as, well, they absconded or they got new charges and they're serving an 1129 sentence, or then they can be sentenced to serve 1129. Well, what about these folks that are serving 1129 for, like I said, possession of drugs or possession of drug paraphernalia? Anyone that's furloughed to treatment, these are all people that have been convicted of misdemeanors. You cannot plead guilty to a felony in General Sessions Court. These are not convicted felons. They're not carjackers. They're not bank robbers or home invaders or anything like that. The vast majority of them are simple possession of drug paraphernalia, shoplifting, which why would somebody shoplift? They're supporting their habit. Shoplifting, some DUIs. If someone's a DUI offender and they've been, released to go to treatment on a furlough, of course, it's a condition of their furlough that they cannot operate a motor vehicle, even though some of them may be eligible to get a restricted driver's license through the Department of Safety. But I would put on there no that they couldn't operate. So then if that would limit them from, they get a job, they couldn't be put in a job where they're in transportation or where they'd have to drive. They'd have to be dependent on someone else to transport them. So it's just an extra, I guess you'd say, layer added in to try to ensure that they're doing the right thing, doing the lawful thing, which is what we want anyway. We want folks to obey the law.
That's a really good explanation, and I appreciate you answering my questions. As we talked about right before we started the show here, one good thing about being a judge is, I can't really ask you what's your most important political issue, because you're not going to be voting on different things. You're not going to be implementing laws. Your job's really different than a lot of other people who are running. But I would at this point, and you've done really good at telling us a lot of the things that you stand behind and that you stand for. But is there anything else about your platform or your campaign that you want to mention here today? Any other specific things that you're trying to do, or anything else you want to talk about?
Well, as you can tell, I'm passionate about trying to help people get treatment if they want the opportunity to go. So I am passionate about that. I believe in it, and as I said before we started the show, back years ago, addiction is different now than it was then. I mean, people have always been addicted to drugs in this country, and I'm including alcohol in that too.
Sure.
I mean, let's face it, Coca-Cola in 1896 when it was invented, it had cocaine in it.
Yeah.
You could get opium, laudanum, as opium, main ingredient was opium. You could buy that on drugstore shelves back then. So, a lot of that's changed with the Food and Drug Administration, the Narcotic Drug Acts that have been passed, and, federally, and our states have followed suit. But now addiction, the face of addiction is different. Back years ago, you might hear of somebody, somebody had I had an uncle that was an alcoholic. You might have that in a family. But, drugs, that wasn't around back then when I was growing up in Dickson County. It was different time. But now it's like, you can't compare the two, honestly, but it's just an analogy. Cancer. How many of us have either a friend or a loved one or family member that has had cancer? I'm seeing now that it's a lot more like that when you ask someone, do you know somebody who's been addicted to drugs or alcohol, or is someone in your family addicted to drugs or alcohol? And universally, people say yes, they know someone. That's why I'm passionate about it. And like I said, I love to help people. I've always had a public servant's heart. That's been my entire career path from when I first got out of school, back in 1997. That's 25 years ago. Wow. I love that there's nothing political about my job. I'm not making the decisions that the United States Supreme Court makes when they're considering the hot button topics. As you know now, with the issue of calls for gun control, the Supreme Court, the leak of the memo from the opinion of the Supreme Court that may overturn Roe v. Wade. My job does not involve any of those issues. I'm hearing cases of where someone was in a car wreck, and the other person hurt them, so they're suing them. I'm hearing cases of landlords and tenants. I'm hearing cases involving bad debts, credit cards and finance companies. I'm hearing speeding tickets, driving on suspended license, along with all the criminal cases. And then the civil cases, I'm hearing orders of protection. Those are domestic in nature between either partners or spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, that sort of thing. This is what us everyday average people, that's what we deal with. That's what can affect us. So that's what I like about what I do. Is it's not political. It doesn't matter to me if someone votes Democrat, if they vote Republican, if they vote Libertarian, if they vote Green Party. I don't ask. I don't care. It doesn't matter. They're a person coming in, and they're bringing a case into court. Either they've been charged or they're the plaintiff on a case. They're bringing a case. That's what's important. It's not how they vote that's important. What's important is what's happened to them or what's been done to them, and what can I do to help them with that. So going back to my platform, I guess you'd say, I'm sorry, I've got off on a tangent here.
This is great. We want to hear from you. So
when I first ran back in 2013, that's when we started campaigning for the job. Mm-hmm. I based my platform on two basic, simple tenets: respect the people and uphold the law. General Sessions Court is a court of the people by the people, and for the people. I mean, it is Dickson County General Sessions Court. It's in the title. I mean, this is for the people of Dickson County. And, you hear judges say, oh, this is my courtroom. You don't get out of order in my courtroom. Don't you do that in my courtroom? It's not the judge's courtroom. I mean, sure, the judge presides over the courtroom. It's the people's courtroom. I mean, if people go back and remember Judge Wapner on People's Court, I mean, that's your average day in general sessions on a civil docket a lot of times. That's what it's about for me. So respect the people. If someone comes into court and they're in a suit, in shiny shoes, or they're wearing, blue jeans and work boots, they come in wearing a uniform with a gun belt and a badge, or they're in an orange jumpsuit wearing shackles. Makes no difference. They're going to be treated with dignity and courtesy. So that was number one, respect the people. Secondly, uphold the law. And what does that mean to me? To me, that means that anyone who comes into court, for whatever reason, they're going to get a hearing if they want one. A lot of people choose not to have hearings. But if they want a hearing, they'll get a hearing. And it's going to be free of bias. It'll be free of partiality. It'll be free of favoritism. And during that hearing, they will have the opportunity to present their case, their evidence, their witnesses, to get the testimony from those witnesses, without the court putting them under a time limit to say, oh, well, you got 10 minutes, you got 30 minutes. I've heard of judges that have done that before. I guess I could maybe see it just in somewhere like Davidson County. But, I'm paid to be there and hold court, and that's what I do. I hold court. So they're going to have that hearing, and they'll have the opportunity to present their case. And at the end of that hearing, I'm going to apply the law as written. We're not making up the laws here as we go. You've heard people say they use the term activist judges. No, you apply the law as written to the evidence that was introduced at the hearing, and then you render a decision based on that. So that's what it means to me to uphold the law. You apply the law as it's written. Judges aren't legislators. They shouldn't seek to legislate from the bench. Judges should apply the law to each case. I mean, each case stands on its own merits. Every case is different. And there's days when I say, oh, I've heard it all now. No, you really haven't. So
I imagine you probably do hear some crazy things.
I could tell some good stories if we ever wanted to sit down and talk about those. But yeah, there's a lot of good stories, and So that's what it means to me. Respect the people and uphold the law. That's my judicial philosophy in a nutshell, and that's just the way I see it.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and talking to me and answering these questions, because you're not just talking to me when we're doing this podcast, but you're talking to anybody who would listen to the show, and been fortunate so far to have quite a few listeners. So I really appreciate you coming in here, because I know that people want to know more about the candidates, and they want to hear what you have to say. And so I just appreciate you taking the time. It does mean a lot to me that you would come down here and do this. Now, before I let you go, I want to get some contact information from you, and I want you to tell the people when voting is, and tell us about any upcoming events that you might be at. But before, one of my favorite parts about this is, before I let people go, I've been having them give me their elevator pitch, and I just love this, because I was at a school that I taught at before I got back to Dickson County, and I had a principal who, we had a school where we were trying to recruit people. It was a private school, and she would always have us work on our elevator pitch to try to, convince people to come, go to our school. And so we always had to work on those, and I always thought it was cool to try to put your sort of your pitch down into maybe 30 or 60 seconds and really get the true essence of it. So I'll ask you, just like I ask everybody else, if I were to run into you on Main Street down here, and we were just kind of passing by, and I stopped you and said, hey, Craig Monsue, I heard you're running for judge, why should I vote for you? What would you tell me if I were to ask you that question up here on Main Street?
Thank you for asking, number one.
Mm-hmm.
let's see, 30 or 60 seconds an elevator pitch. Well, I have been beyond blessed to have been elected in 2014 to serve the citizens of this county that's done so much for me and given back so much for me, and I just want to give a little bit back to it. I'm sorry for the awkward pause.
No, it's a tough question, isn't it? Because there's a lot of things, but if I were just to ask you to kind of concise it down, and you don't have to be that short. You can go for a few minutes if you need to.
Well, I don't need to. I just like I said, this county's given so much to me, and I want to give back to it. And I love serving the people of Dickson County. I was, like I said, beyond blessed to be elected to my first term in 2014. 8 years has gone by in the blink of an eye. We've made a lot of progress in court, like I said, with the traffic school that I started up, and now wanting to bring in the drug court. But we've still got a ways to go. So I believe in what we're doing over in Charlotte at General Sessions Court, and I hope that your listeners that have heard today that they can believe in it too. We have an adversarial system, but it doesn't have to be adversarial by nature. Like I said, two simple things: respect the people, uphold the law. If you ask me what I am in 6 words, that's it.
I'd say that's pretty good. That's a pretty good summation of it. Now, listen, if somebody's been listening to us and they have some questions that maybe I haven't thought of, because, I try to think of questions, but there's probably somebody out there listening who's thought of a really good question that they'd like to ask you, and it may sway them one way or the other to vote for you or maybe vote for your opponent. Is there a way they could contact you to maybe ask you that question? Email, website, Facebook page, any way they can contact you?
Sure. It's my email is craigmonsue@comcast.net. Well, I've got a Facebook page. It's if you go to Facebook, it's Reelect Monsue. I've also got a Facebook page under my personal Facebook page, and if you just search my name, CraigMonsue, it should pop right up. And you can send me a message on Messenger, send me a friend request, and I'll be glad to answer anybody's questions. I'm in Charlotte. It's not a far drive from here in Dickson. If anyone wants to know anything about me too, and I would actually encourage people, come and sit and watch court. It can be entertaining at times.
I don't think a lot of people know that they can do that.
Absolutely. It's open to the public. It is. I mean, this isn't secret squirrel meetings we're having over there. This is up front. It's an open book, transparent. If you want to talk about transparency in government, that's court.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I mean,
that's a good point.
No, you come over and you want to see how it works. Please be my guest. We'd love to have you.
Are there any upcoming events or special appearances? I know last week there was a lot of folks that are running were out at the Promised Land festival that was out there in Charlotte, and that was fantastic. And I know here in, I don't know if it's next week or the week after, it's coming up, but there's a street festival here in downtown Dickson.
Sure.
I don't think it's this weekend, but it's in the next few weeks.
It's the 25th.
Okay. Are you going to be at any of those events or any place where people could come by and maybe talk to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. We'll be out at the Dickson Street Festival.
Awesome.
The fishing rodeo at Buckner Lake this weekend, Saturday morning at 6 o'clock.
They shut down the fishing for the rest of the week just for that event.
Well, I've got I might have mentioned previously, which I'm awful proud of them, and if I neglected to do so, that's we've talked about a lot today. A lot of thoughts flying through my head. I'm the proud father of 2 twins, fraternal twins, Delaney and Presley. They just finished kindergarten at Centennial Elementary.
Oh wow, cool!
Going into first grade this next next month after next, August.
It's going to happen.
It's coming up fast, right? They'll be going into first grade, and I bought them the before they turned 3. It was the lifetime sportsman's licenses through the TWRA. So I think they want, which Saturday's a free fishing day, so also for your listeners, anybody that's got kids or you like to, you want to bring the kids out to go fishing on Saturday at Buckner Lake, bring them on out. It's free fishing day. But I'll be out there with my kids casting a line and see if we get any luck.
Well, we've come to the end of the show. I want to thank you again for coming on and talking with me today. Appreciate all of the listeners out there in Dickson County. And if anybody's listening who would like to be on the show, who's running for office, feel free to send me a message or an email at coachspurlock@gmail.com, and we'll be glad to get you on the show. Thank